Oh, yeah.
He's here to mess us up.
Close enough. That's what,
Daniel's here. Hey, we got more than enough.
Oh, yeah. Evening.
Here comes.
it's on there. It's the second.
Wow, we got a full house.
I knew them two would show up.
Got a full house. On him.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How evening, Ashley?
Good evening. I always get this chair. Wanna switch me?
You want this one? I'll switch.
She got it again.
I'm like 5 foot tall.
That's my niece at there.
I always take the
Every
short
time.
chair. That way I can hide behind the screen.
That's what you always say, but
I know, Jerry used to get it all the time. I liked it.
I feel like
Yeah, I didn't think quick enough. to
I'm
get the front
hiding
one.
anyways.
I can hide behind the screen.
Oh, this is short.
I told you. Joke.
And everybody's on time too. Thought for sure we were past 7.
No, you are.
I saw Mr. Burlington doing that. I thought, oops. I'm like, I better do that.
Always a good thing.
Okay, 7 o'clock, so let's call the meeting to order. Let's start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Hall,
Here.
Ms. Hamel,
Present.
Mr. Hoag,
Present.
Mr. Merlington,
Present.
Mr. McGrath. Here. Mr. Nixon. Here. And Mr. Conley is here. We have Mr. Tim Johnson here today as our planner for at least 1 or 2 more times. And right now, we need to look at the minutes for last meeting, the regular meeting of August 10th. Need to look those over and see if they're approvable. If so, I would entertain a motion to approve those.
Seconded.
Anything we need to look at on there? Hearing none, please indicate with aye if you would like to approve tonight's minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes, the minutes are approved. Now we have to approve tonight's agenda. Everyone's had a chance to look at that.
Motion to approve.
I'll look in order here. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. It's now time for public comments. So those citizens wishing to speak on agenda or non-agenda items will be allowed a maximum of 4 minutes each to address their concerns. This is the only time during the meeting that citizens are allowed to address the planning commission. Please state your name and address for the record if you would like. None here. Is there anyone on Zoom?
Mr. Conley, we did have a young woman who was here a minute ago and I don't see where she went to.
Okay.
I didn't recognize her. She might be a member of the public here for public comment.
I think she was the one for the drive-through.
Rapids.
You guys have the benefit of looking at that.
That's fine.
Well, there also will be the public hearing, so perhaps.
I just heard the door.
Mr. McLeod is here for a particular purpose.
Here comes somebody.
Mr. McLeod, can you hear me? If so, we are in public comment if you would like to make a public comment at this time.
Yes, I can hear you just fine, and I have no public comments to offer at this time, other than say good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Not hearing any public comments. I'll close that period of public
She's back
comment.
here now.
Okay. This was, a couple people came in during the public comment period, so I just wanted to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to comment publicly if they wanted to. Okay. Seeing that, we'll close the public comments and move on to conflicts of interest and ex parte communication. Does anyone on the planning commission have any of either to declare tonight? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to scheduled public hearings. The first public hearing tonight is a public hearing for an ordinance to amend chapter 40, article 3, division 12, to add section 4390 entitled the White Pine Trail Overlay Zone. To amend article 3, division 1, section 4131 entitled zoning districts, to add the White Pine Overtrail Zone and to modify the map entitled to the map, zoning map of Cedar Springs. And Mr. Womack was telling us that we didn't actually have the copy of the ordinance in our packet. So I'm going to leave it up to the planning commission to, if you feel comfortable continuing without seeing those. They were in last month's meeting, and we've been speaking about this for quite a while prior to this. But actually, I'm jumping ahead. I need to get the public hearing done first. So this is the public hearing. I'm going to open this up to anyone here that would like to address the White Pine Overlay Zone, White Pine Trail Overlay Zone. If you would like to, feel free to come up and please state your name and if your address if you would like.
Rose Powell, Cedar Springs. I support this overlay ordinance, and we've discussed it. And I think if someone were to put a food truck along that trail in the summertime, they'd make a killing. And we also have to consider the fact that maybe we would get a business in there that would be year round. So whatever would make that property over there more productive and valuable and more of a draw for our city, I would support. Thank you.
Any other public comment in the chambers tonight? Yes.
We have Mr. Womack for the general public, give a brief summary of what this ordinance entails.
Sure.
So essentially what we're doing is we're creating a new zoning district. So there's a number of properties that abut the White Pine Trail that are currently zoned industrial. But as this body has discovered, the industrial properties, could be, at least in theory, used for non-industrial uses if we were to create this zone. Things such as an ice cream store or a bicycle shop. Whereas under the current industrial zoning designation, those would not be permitted uses in those districts. So an overlay zone is kind of like an extra set of use rights on a piece of property so that you could convert an industrial property into a food establishment or a retail establishment.
With that, I'll extend another opportunity for public comment in case anyone else wanted to. Is there anyone online?
We have one person waiting for admission.
Mr. McLeod, do you have any public comment?
No, sir, I do not, other than say thank you for offering.
Also a mic as well.
Mike, do you have a public comment?
Hearing none, I will close the public hearing on the White Pine Trail Overlay Zone. And we'll move on to the next public hearing tonight. We have a,
Mr. Conley, so
yes,
one of the things we discussed at a previous meeting was lumping the public hearings along with the motions and discussions on those.
yes,
I'm not telling you how to do your job, but
Oh, please.
I did put the motion there for you to do that immediately if you wanted to. But you could skip to the next public hearing and then double. But I don't think these are located anywhere else in your agenda. So we would have to take care of them during the public hearing section of the agenda.
oh, I see what you're saying. That's, I see, okay. I was thinking about the motion for the next public hearing, but now I recognize that that's there. So I guess this would be a good time if we'd like to entertain a motion on moving forward with the White Pine Trail overlay. I have the verbiage right here. I can make the motion.
The only thing I'd recommend is Mr. Johnson did identify one
Sure.
typo. If you'd like to amend the recommendation with the typo.
Sure.
Right, on the first page of the draft ordinance dated May 11th, under applicability, if you look on the second line, it says the overlay zone applies to the streets between Elm and Church. That should actually be between Maple Street and Church Street. It's the actual geographic area of the overlay zone. So that's the type of change Elm Street to Maple Street in the applicability section.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to recommend approval to the city council of an ordinance to amend chapter 40, article 3, division 12, to add section 4390 entitled White Pine Trail Overlay Zone, to amend article 3, division 1, section 4131 entitled zoning districts, to add White Pine Trail Overlay Zone, and to modify the map entitled the zoning map of Cedar Springs with the correction under the applicability that was,
Mr. Johnson has indicated.
as Mr. Johnson has indicated. How about that?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of recommending to the city council, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Ooh, that was a tight one. So moving on to the second public hearing. This is for a special land use of Pinebrook Warren LLC DBA Cloud Cannabis Cedar Springs at 206 and 218 North Main Street, Cedar Springs. Before we move into that public hearing, could we have another quick synopsis from Mr. Womack about what this is about so that the public can know what they're commenting on?
Sure, just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Tim, Could we recommend or require that we combine this? Sort of. All right, so this would be, I believe, the current preferred landscaping location. And what has occurred is this body approved of a special land use for marijuana retailer at that location. And subsequent to that, my understanding is that K-Kind wanted to sell their property and license to this company, Pinebrook Warren, doing business as Cloud Cannabis. However, under our ordinances, we have no provision for transfer of licenses. So we're essentially treating it like a new license. And so they have the benefit of having a site plan which was already approved of by this body. It's probably 98% the same what you saw last time. There are some very minor changes, which are essentially all positive changes in my opinion. You've read the planner's report. They're very minor changes, and I can't think of any reasons not to approve of it. And Mr. McLeod, who is present online, is here on this item if you have any questions for him.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll open it up to public comment. Any member of the public that'd like to comment on this, please step forward and give us your name and address if you'd like. Okay, seeing none, anyone online that would like to have public comment?
Mr. McLeod, do you have any comment on this item?
No, other than just appreciate the time and looking forward to hopefully bringing Cloud Cannabis to Cedar Springs. Right now, we're open in Traverse City, Ann Arbor, Utica, and Muskegon. As part of this kind of K-kind acquisition that we did as a company, we took over 70,000 square feet of cultivation in Kalamazoo. And I have a processing lab in Warren as well. And then before the end of the year, I'll be opening Detroit, Gaylord, and New Baltimore. So we're just looking to expand our footprint across the state. Very excited to bring a thriving business to Cedar Springs. My background is in law enforcement. I'm a retired police officer, became cannabis by way of medicine, and just really excited to bring a really good cannabis partner to the community.
Thank you. Okay.
So Mr. Conley, Mr. Johnson and I were just discussing this. There's one item that I didn't see anywhere, and I would like to make it a part of your motion if you're at that stage.
I certainly can take it on, I'll write it down here, and then I'm guessing we should probably close the actual public hearing before we then go into the
I'm
motion.
a member of the public. I can't comment during this.
I go right ahead. No, I said I'll take your amendment, and then I'll close the public hearing, and then we'll go into the whole motion part.
So this might be one of those no-brainers that we just never wrote down, and that is this proposed property use is located on two separate properties, 206 and 218.
One.
It should be a requirement that those two be combined into one property.
And we would be completely amenable to be doing that.
Thank you.
Before I close the public hearing, I had a new entrance come in during that time. We are middle of a public hearing on cloud cannabis. Did you have anything you'd like to add to it? Thank you. With that, I'll be closing the public hearing, and we can move on to the motion. We normally have some discussion before we throw the motion out there. So is there anything that anyone on the planning commission would like to ask or have or add? Yes.
So in looking at this, it looked like they had the same driveway structure, and they're gonna keep that where it comes in off of Main and comes out onto Pine. Is that correct?
Yep. So the exterior site plan is essentially unchanged from what you
Okay.
saw previously. There are some minor changes made, I believe, to the landscaping and lighting. Don't think there's much other exterior changes. There's some interior floor space changes,
Yes, I saw that.
but otherwise it's essentially the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? The facade plan I'm seeing on here, one of the items we have to address is whether or not the facade plan is acceptable. Has everyone had a chance to look at the facade plan, and are they in
It's the
agreement with that?
same. I don't think he changed it at all from K-Kind.
The color changed, and of course their logo is different.
Well, but I mean, the wood up at the top
Right.
and the metal, he's
Right.
keeping that, and I think a white building.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to, I'm not saying you should have a problem with that. I'm just curious if everyone's had a chance to look at the facade. And because that's one of the things that we have to approve.
I had no concerns.
I'm going through the items here to see if there's anything that
Okay.
we might need to comment on. Most of it is, as we said before, pretty much what we did before, but that's one thing that would have been a change.
And Mr. Conley, just mostly for Mr. McLeod's benefit, the logo, of course, we don't judge based on the content of the logo.
Oh, of course.
And secondly, that would be considered signage, and signage is not approved of during the site plan review process. That is a separate thing run through the city manager's office.
I misspoke if I
was zoning.
intended to suggest that we were doing that. I was merely pointing out that there were some changes. One of which was quite obvious. They would have a different name. Okay. Hearing nothing else from the plan commission. This is quite a long one. I actually, is it okay if I make the motion just basically following what's on the page, saying as on the page with the changes that we're going to make, and that's okay? All right. Then I'll move to approve the request from Pinebrook Warren LLC for a special land use to establish a marijuana retail establishment at 206 and 28 North Main Street, as is included on the agenda, with the addition that we'll have to add a point 11 for that the 206 and 218 North Main properties will have to be combined. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. McLeod, would you kindly get a hold of me probably tomorrow or the next day?
It would be my pleasure, Mike. Thank you. Thanks for all your help.
And I never officially closed the public hearing. Is there something I need to do to remedy that? And at this point,
You did. You did close it.
I did close public hearing? Oh, okay.
You did.
Thank you. Thank
By the
you.
motion, by the meeting of the motion.
Okay.
Mr. Conley, you're the chair. You can just declare it.
You can just do
By
whatever. you want.
fiat. Okay, good enough.
You are in charge.
I want to be correct. I have some fine legal minds and Mr. Womack here who can help me with this.
Ha!
So, moving on to,
I didn't get that until he said out.
moving on to old business. Item A under old business is a site plan review and special land use for G Rapids, or Rapids. You'll have to tell me how to say that properly. I'm sorry. 17 LLC, 4173 17 Mile Road, Cedar Springs, to establish a drive-through restaurant. So where are we at now, Mr. Womack?
Subsequent to the last meeting, we had some discussions with applicants about what we saw as the shortcomings, the major shortcomings of their proposal, which was primarily the number of parking spaces that were provided, and then also the conflicts between the drive-through exit and the, I guess I'll call it just the exit lane. And I indicated to them that they needed to provide additional information regarding those two major issues. And I did not personally review the updated site plan, but Mr. Johnson did. It seems to indicate that they've mostly addressed every other issue other than these two major ones. So that being said, regarding these two major issues, they have presented some additional information, not so much in increasing the number of parking spaces, which seems to be impossible given the site constraints. But they did present information related to at least two other local Jimmy John locations, which have, I believe, 20 or 22 parking spaces total. That combined with the change from, I think it was 3 or 4 that they had originally proposed other businesses at this location, down to one other general retail at this time location, which I think based on square footage was going to be at 14 parking spaces. So that all being told, 20-ish parking spaces for Jim and John's plus 14 parking spaces for the general retail has them at approximately 35 needed. And that's pretty much exactly what they're proposing. There's currently 37 on site. Mr. Johnson's indicated a desire that 2 of them be removed. I'm sure he'll walk you through that part of it. You know, this is just one of those conflicts that we have with our essentially outdated parking ordinance, which this body has on many occasions indicated that they believe it's outdated. I believe it requires 55, 54 parking spaces, which is just unrealistic. You know, I go to Jim and John's on a pretty regular basis. I've never once seen a parking lot full. I am still a little concerned about the stacking distance in the drive-through. But you know, we also can't be everybody's mother and cop. We do have to expect people to act reasonable, and for the most part, people do. I think the bigger point of discussion should be about the conflict that exists between the drive-through exit and the exit lane, because you have, you know, 2 cars going like this, And you're gonna have signage that says left-hand turn only for the drive-through lane. You know, people don't like being told what to do. And at least in my review of the site plan, there was only one stop sign at that location. I mean, look, people are, again, generally pretty reasonable. But if they're exiting a drive-through lane, I don't see why we couldn't add a second stop sign there. But other than that, it's, you know, it's a nice site plan. It's just whether this body is willing to make the compromises necessary based on what our ordinances say, and whether you find what they're presenting as reasonable. So, Mr. Johnson?
With my report.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Well, they've given us a new site plan, and as Mr. Womack said, one of the biggest issues is the parking. And based on our parking ordinance, where the Jimmy John's would require a certain amount of parking, the other side is proposed as general retail, and that requires a different parking formula. Add those two spaces together in the formula, you have 50 parking spaces are required. Your zoning ordinance has some language in there that appears to give you the discretion to approve the number of parking spaces for a particular use. It's not as strong as I would like, but it tells me that you have that discretion. So the applicant has the burden of convincing you that the 37 parking spaces they provided is the correct number. And I'll leave that to you to decide whether that is the correct number or not, and they'll be here to convince you of that number as well. So some other things of note. There's 2 parking spaces as you come into it. They're both diagonal parking spaces. I felt those were a little close to when cars come in, if cars are backing out of those spaces, that might cause other cars to stop and back up. And that's why we recommended that they be taken out and some landscape islands be put in there instead, rather not paint stripe. Landscape islands work a little bit better. So that's one of the recommendations. They have provided a 5-foot concrete sidewalk from the sidewalk along 17 Mile Road to the proposed building, and then some striping through the parking lot just to alert drivers of people walking through there. They provided wrong way signs for people that may, if they're not paying attention, try to come in the exit area, which is good. I'd recommended a left turn only sign for the person leaving the drive up window, that they could only turn left rather than right, where they would possibly turn into the car next to them on their right. And they have put a stop sign there. Mr. Womack suggested another stop sign for exiting vehicles, which I think is a good idea. And one of the standards for site plan approval, which I put in my report, talks about the site plan should present or have a safe and efficient traffic circulation system for vehicles and pedestrians. That's one of the standards. So you're being asked tonight to approve and make sure that this project meets that standard, that the traffic circulation on that site is safe and efficient. If you find that's the case, then you may approve the plan. One of the other concerns raised at the previous meeting was the cars lining up at the drive-up window could back up in front of the barrier-free spaces, which is a possibility. And you could move them to the west side of the building, but the ADA requirements say that they've got to be in front. So to move them over the side doesn't really accomplish that. There's room, I think, to slide those 2 barrier-free spaces off to the left as you look at the building. That gains you maybe 1 or 2 parking spaces. That may be the best you can get there. So that should be something you would want to consider as well. Building facade, they gave us a black and white version and a colored version, which I don't think I put those 2 together. One has the key for the type of materials and the color, and I think the black and white version doesn't, or vice versa. But those two do come together to tell us what those materials are. I think they do generally meet our architectural standards, and the color you have on the screen in front of you, you can see what those colors are. There's some issues with the lighting plan, the photometric plan. It seems like every photometric plan that comes in the last year, they're always a bit short on the barrier-free lighting requirements. They're supposed to be 3-foot candles. These are only 2.4-foot candles of illumination for the barrier-free spaces. That's easily corrected. The 28-foot light poles are allowed by our zoning ordinance. With your approval, they're supposed to limit it to 20 feet, but our ordinance says for commercial uses, you may approve a site site lighting up to 28 feet, and I think that's acceptable given the lights that are out there on that project already or on that site. Plan notes that lights will reduce to 30% illumination at 11 p.m. and information on color temperatures should be provided. That's in my report. I think Mr. Womack in his manager's report said that's actually hidden somewhere on their photometric plan sheet. So I'll take his word for that. They need to provide us with details on the dumpster enclosure, what that looks like, where the bollards are, the gates and that sort of thing, which can be subject to the city manager's approval. And then one minor point, they proposed a crabapple tree on the right side of the exiting lane. I think when that tree reaches maturity, that's going to block some vision. So I just recommended they take that out of there. And then special land use standards. I've written those out and some brief analysis of that. I think probably the thing you want to look at here most would be, I think, standard number 4 as to whether there's any conditions or operation that would be detrimental to persons or property because of production of traffic. And again, just looking at the traffic movement on that site, you'd have to decide whether, because of the slow speed of vehicles going through there, and they're probably busy 2 hours out of the day when most people go in and out of there, whether that standard is met in terms of safe traffic movement on the site. So I've given you two options for a motion. You could table it until all these items are taken care of, or if at the end of your discussion you find that these are approvable, I've given you a motion to consider as well. So with that, I would ask if anybody has any questions. Mr. Nixon.
Now, when you say 35 to 37 spaces, is that just for general public spaces, or is that including the workers?
That includes the workers.
Okay.
I mean, the formula that I came up with for 54, that's, if they met the ordinance, that would include the employees as well. 54 spaces is what our ordinance requires. The 37 spaces minus 2 would give you 35. That's just whether you think that accommodates everybody that wants to go in that building or works in it. I think they have provided some information about reaching some kind of an agreement with AutoZone to the east of there to use their parking lot. You guys can expand on that. That's a possibility as well.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Is there a representative from the applicant that would like to?
Hello, my name is Melanie Hart. I'm with Paradigm Design, engineering consultant for Rapid 17 LLC. And Michael Murray is here representing Rapid 17 as well. If you guys remember, I was here back in July. So we're back again. We addressed as many comments as we could and made a lot of considerations based on the comments from Tim and from Mike. So very open to discussing any of them and updating you guys on where we're at. So I did have a PowerPoint. I'm not sure if we could share it on the screen as well.
Yeah, it's in the agenda, so they should have it on their computer.
Okay, they have it. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I basically, if you want me to refresh you on the project, the site itself is about 0.94 acres with 0.74 acres being usable. It's currently a vacant lot that's impervious with asphalt and utilities in place. What's being proposed, is a 2,758 square foot being designated for general retail, and then the remaining 1,350 square feet for a drive-through restaurant, which is proposed to be a Jimmy John's. And so that was a slightly different change than the July meeting, moving down to the 2 tenants. Another change you may see is just the drive-through window being consistently at the center of the side of the building. So there was communication with Jimmy John's about that location of that drive-through window. I know one of the comments were maybe moving that window further north to allow more stacking. And to help with one of the other comments about maybe some of the ADA spots being blocked. However, Jimmy John's, the way their floor plan works, it has to be at the center side of the building. So we took that one into consideration, but had to keep the window where we're showing it. The ADA consideration that was mentioned by Tim, we want your guys' opinion on it, but we were thinking it's best, like if somebody was in a wheelchair, that they are closest to the doors, to the entry doors. So we kept it there, but I believe we are open to moving it if needed in our final design. If you guys do some sort of, conditional approval with some of the items that you're talking about, but we submitted the site plan the way it is, but we are open to discussing some of the changes that maybe were not completely changed on our site plan with our last submittal. Mike, would you like to come up and talk about your efforts with AutoZone, family farm and home perhaps?
Mr. Chair.
So my name is Mike Murray. This is the second time I've been here physically. The first time was with Advanced Auto Parts. We developed that store and you guys were kind enough to approve that site. And we're very happy with the way that turned out, and hopefully the community is as well. So we're here back just to put on the addition in our mind, which is this strip center that we're proposing. With respect to the site itself, because of the parking and such, and the concerns that were raised by this body, we spoke with Advanced Auto Parts to see if they would be amenable, to cooperate between us for the customer's sake, is to have shared parking, and they're definitely open to that. They just asked us not to have employees or customers park on the west side of the building, because that's where they park their delivery trucks, and their employees park on the west side. But the back and the front, we just assume the front because the customers, some may want to go into Advanced Auto Parts, and some may want to go over to, grab a sandwich. And vice versa. You want to speak about the islands and slide truck movements?
Oh yeah, so one of the last slides I included were some auto turns. I know one of the concerns were possibly removing 2 of the parking spaces. And I just was unclear if, if you guys really wanted to remove those parking spaces because of being under what the ordinance is showing. We did some auto turns. We used a Ford F-250 truck, and it can actually make it without going into the cross access roadway there. However, it's able to pull forward and all that. There are cars that might have to wait for that back parking space to kind of move out, but it is the furthest from the door. So it's probably the parking spaces that'll be used last, and it'll be a quick maneuver. So that way the circulation can still flow. So I did include that exhibit if that helps understand, the capability of, large pickup trucks kind of making that maneuver. And then I did do an exhibit just showing the loading zone. There was talk about the types of trucks for Jimmy John's delivery, and they're usually 23 to 38 feet in length. So the truck being shown is much longer than what would actually be delivering for Jimmy John's. But that loading area is 70 feet long. And the dumpster, I believe, was turned from the last time in July. So it does allow for longer vehicles there for loading.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but our computers are slow, and I'm trying to scroll through to find those turning plans that you said.
Yep.
Has anyone else found them?
I don't remember those being in your packet.
Okay.
Yeah, me either.
Okay.
I didn't see them when I looked at the first one.
I think I added that after talking to you, Tim, and then I sent it over to you on Thursday or Friday by email. So it was probably too late with the Labor Day weekend, but yeah, we did do those auto turn movements in AutoCAD to just verify that.
Chair, I do have a couple questions if I may.
Sure.
Ms. Hart, one of the things you indicated was your reluctance to move the ADA spots. My concern is, after we approve this project and people start using it, it might happen. So do you, or would you have an alternative other than moving those ADA spots to correct that problem if it occurs?
So my thought is that Jimmy John's, if it does get blocked, I mean, the Jimmy John's customers, they go through very quickly. The Jimmy John's, I think, business model is to move very fast. I go through the Jimmy John's on my lunch breaks a lot, but I would think that it might be higher priority for a disabled person to be close to the door. But if you guys feel that it should be shifted west and would like to have that done, we can make that a conditional change. We're open either way. but-
So I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect. So are there other alternatives? I mean, is there signage you could put at the end of where the stacking, lane ends there? Say, don't pull in at this point? And is there some alternative that's used in other communities?
I've never seen it, but I know you could probably stripe behind those spaces in particular. And I don't know how that would function because they're kind of further away. You'd have to, if you had about 4 to 5 cars stacked, the next car, if you striped it to not block those cars, would be kind of far. I don't know how they might not be able to see around. I don't know if it'll function very well.
If you look at McDonald's, they have the same problem. The ADA spots and there's other spots right there in front of the door. When it backs up, you can't back out. It's the same problem at McDonald's. And it is just something that you have with businesses sometimes. And I'm just pointing that out that McDonald's has the same problem.
Sure. And there's a place I used to go to on the east side of the state where every single day it was like that, which led me to park on the other side of the parking lot because I hated it. But that's not my job today to say, well, it exists other places, it's fine. They're here, they're asking for us to look, overlook something. And I'm just trying to delve into whether there are other possibilities. Because, again, we can approve this. And then 6 months from now, I'm going to be getting calls from people saying, you need to come out and shoot somebody because they won't let me out of my ADA spot. And I need to know that these applicants are willing to say, well, you know what? You were right, it's a problem, and here's how we can address it after approval. And so, she's indicating, well, conditionally, we could move the ADA spots if they have to, which is a bit extreme. And I don't want to have to do that for the reasons that have been elucidated already. But if there's some kind of striping or signage or other ways to address it, it's nice to know that now.
Now, at Advance, we have, they put our ADA spots on the side of the building. Now, is that something new that they have to put the ADA spots in front of the building, Mr. Till?
Something new, no. I believe my knowledge of the barrier-free laws tell me that they have to have the barrier-free spaces closest to the front door.
See, at Advance, they're not. So what I was thinking was, could we not put them on the west side of the building there, right at that front corner?
Well, it's still a sidewalk. They have to take the sidewalk to the front door. Now,
Right.
What are the architectural possibilities of putting a door on the side of the building as well? Move the ADA spaces there and put a door on the side of the building so they meet that particular standard.
It wouldn't be into the restaurant though.
It would only be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
not
I'm
Jimmy
assuming,
John's,
but
is it?
yeah,
No.
it's gonna be only
Yeah.
access to the
But I
retail,
mean, if you've got a,
unless you have a through door.
well, but if you've got the barrier-free where you can just step up onto the concrete there, you can go around to the front. And that's what has to happen at Advance, so.
What I'm hearing is Advance needs to have a site visit, with
Doesn't-
ADA compliance people to see if they're still in compliance.
Don't, I didn't say that. Don't get me in trouble. Okay.
So
Don't get me
I
in
want
trouble.
to recognize that we still have you up here. waiting while we converse about this. And then Ms. Hamel had her hand up before. So did you have a question for that?
Yeah, I was just wondering if Jimmy John's has given you like a number of cars that they usually get in terms of the rush that are waiting. Cause like, I don't see it being as busy as McDonald's,
Yeah, we were talking about that.
but like, do they have you like, do they have like a number where they said like the most we usually get is 8 cars
They're pretty
waiting at one
fast.
time or 6 cars waiting at one time?
They told me that in their drive-through, they get typically 2 cars, because they're moving lightning fast,
Freaky.
Ever meeting?
freaky fast.
Because if that's the case, it looks
They
like
are.
4 or 5 cars probably would fit before getting to the spots. So if in the rush period, that never really happens, then probably. it's not gonna be.
They're fast.
I've never seen more than a couple either, but I've
I
also
haven't
not
either.
been there.
All the times I've stopped at Jimmy John's, they've been, by the time you hit the order and you drive around, there may be 2 vehicles in front of you and you're there and you're ready.
Yeah.
They're-
Chair, I have a second question if I could.
Sure.
Mr. Murray, you indicated that you believe Advanced Auto Next Door would be ameliorative to your request to have parking shared.
They sent, we exchanged emails. I think that, Melanie may have
That was
forgotten.
in the same email that I sent to you on Thursday or Friday.
So,
But-
You can see the language.
so under the city's ordinance, to have shared parking be considered for approval, it has to be presented in a signed writing. Signed writing to present to this board.
Signed writing, no, email.
I guess I'll piggyback on that. Could signed writing be provided at some point in the process?
I'd have to speak with Casey, the manager. I can speak with him and see, you know, when I go by and see. Give me something. Like, sign mine. You know, in the spirit, it's really in the spirit of being neighborly. It helps. It's crafty. So, if you're considering a site plan, you're considering it based upon the total count. And whether or not that meets your expectations. As far as the spirit of cooperation between us, it exists, the spirit of cooperation. But as far as something's binding for you, I don't want to misrepresent that it would be something binding, but I can ask Casey for something in writing, if you already have something in writing versus email.
I'm just making the assumption that if we're going to consider that as part of our, overall approach to the parking, that we want to know that it firmly exists. Or we could not consider that if we don't believe that it firmly exists. So I was just trying to make sure we knew where we were on that.
Mr. Conley, I've reviewed an email. I don't remember ever seeing this, but it does indicate, as Mr. Murray's stating, and of course, we expect all businesses to act neighborly and be willing to share parking spaces and all that, but obviously, we don't work in neighborliness here. We work in legal requirements. And so, we could require that. Not saying we necessarily have to, but I'm the one who gets phone calls. So.
I have another question. So for the retail, do you have any idea of what kind of retail it would be? Like, is this gonna be like a boutique thing or like a convenience thing where we would expect a lot of in and out?
We're speaking of general retail right now, a number of uses. I don't have a specific use to answer your question other than just general retail.
Do you have a
uses would
definition
require-
of what general retail would be?
It could be that who we're talking to in the types like, you have Verizon out there, a competitor for Verizon.
Okay.
Tax plans,
Okay.
So for what it's worth, Ms. Hamel, if and when they do get a second tenant in there, they would have to seek a separate approval for that use. So that they would have to come to the city and say, well, here's our use, here's what our expected required parking would be for that.
That is the issue is. Personally, I think the parking is totally fine for the Jimmy John's and
More
possibly
than
stuff
that.
like that you're saying, where it would be like
As much as I'd like to have
not a
a,
bunch of in and out, but it's hard to say if you don't know what the other part is.
I guess the other question too is you need to future proof this. If somebody if Jimmy John's fails and something else goes in there, you might have a parking issue.
Yeah, so on one of the slides, I kind of broke out the parking summary. So if you think about the 37 spaces, the general retail side, based on the square footage, requires 14 spaces. And then what's remaining is the 23 spaces. And that 23 spaces, we were thinking would justify the Jimmy John's itself. So 23 spaces kind of more realistic for the Jimmy John's that we're seeing at adjacent neighborhoods. So the 14 spaces for the general retail is met. And then maybe the actual drive-in restaurant might be the question. But if you think of it as 14 and 23, maybe it justifies it in your head as enough spaces for this type of development with the two tenants.
Before I recognize you, Mr. Nixon, did you get the comment you were trying to get earlier? Mr. Hogg? I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I actually, Ms. Hamlin, I were kind of
Ms. Nixon?
sidebarring there. Yeah.
When you
got the answer.
did the flashpoint where you were pulling the vehicle in and out of the back spaces, did you, back to the ADA spaces, if somebody pulls in with a full-size van that needs to get a wheelchair out and stuff, is that big enough to be able to get one of those full-size vans in and around and up in there? Because that's the only thing that worries me if we move them next or any further over, is you won't be able to turn a full-size van. And that's why I was suggesting the other side of the building. Because you don't have just minivans that pull
Well,
in.
I think still with the only 5 before they even get there. They say that they only have 2 in
Well,
line,
what I
so
was
let's just assume
talking-
we have 5 here. Yeah, but we won't get to here. Anyway, so we probably. only
Right,
gonna need
I
to
was
shift
just
some.
asking, make sure that the big vans can make that turn there.
Oh, as they are now.
Yes, the auto turns that we did was
Auto
a
turns.
Ford F-250, which is 19 feet in length.
Mhm.
I would think the,
But you did that in the ADA spots too?
not in the ADA spots, but they are the same size.
Should I give
Um,
them the visual here? It's on
Oh,
the
yeah,
paper.
maybe we
Yeah.
could pass that
Yeah,
around,
pass it. Yeah, that'd be helpful.
but you'd have to visualize that, I
18
guess, at
foot
the
deep.
ADA
That's a good
spaces.
question.
I think he's looking at that island with the sidewalk pulled out to the southwest.
No, that's just striping.
You have an 18-foot separation between the ADA and the
This
back
is an island,
parking,
the sidewalk.
and they're
They have to
18-foot
go
deep.
around this, all of this. This isn't open.
Right. They
Right?
do.
So you're saying they'd have to go all the way over here if they can fit in here. Yeah,
But if we had to move them over, then you're not gonna be able to fit a
Right.
full-size van in there.
but they should be able to.
That's what I'm
where they
thinking.
Exactly are now.
Any other questions? Mr. Johnson?
Just a comment about future uses. And on the last page of my report, one of the conditions that I put in there was that any future uses proposed for the site would only be permitted if the number of parking spaces required for all uses is no more than 35. Keeping in mind, sometime in the future, we may be changing our parking regulations as well. So, at that point,
Me, yes.
Mr. Johnson, question for those parking spaces, is that based on the type of businesses they go in there? Being new to the planning commission, I'm just trying to understand, when you put parking spaces in a facility like this, what do you base that knowledge off of?
Our zoning ordinance has a whole chapter devoted to.
Okay,
This use requires this many parking spaces based on the square footage.
square footage of building, not the usage of the building.
Well,
Well, it's a use, they have.
Or is it a either or both?
No, it's a laundromat has so many, a furniture store has so many.
Yeah.
Based on this, so this, the use, the type of retail use, or the type of industrial use, or the type of apartment use. You know,
Okay.
They all have different parking formulas.
Yeah.
So based on square footage. Typically.
I'm just hoping for future.
Yeah.
Be
so
more-
as-
more
as
knowledgeable.
Mr. Womack said, if the use comes in there 5 years from now, they have to come in and tell us what that use is going to be, and if it tips the scale over 35, then our answer is,
No.
you may not be able to use, you may not be able to start that business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We've kept you up there for quite a while. so
Sorry.
thanks.
Sorry.
Thank you for your patience. Okay, there's a lot of moving parts on this. So, I'm gonna ask the planning commission. We've been given two options, by the planner here. I mean, obviously, we have the ability to pick other options if we'd like, but the two obvious options are to table or to move forward. I want to get a feeling from the group before we invest any more time in this. Does this feel like we're close?
It's close.
Yeah.
Going down to 2 spots, the new site plans.
Yeah.
Much better.
Okay, well, then let's hammer through this then. There was an issue that came up with the left turn from the drive-through and the right turn from the normal exit from the parking lot. Would it be, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Johnson or Mr. Womack first if this is feasible, would it be helpful if there was a small concrete section that directed the people that were exiting the drive-through lane that they had to turn left because it curved out to the left, and the people that were leaving from the regular exit that they had to turn to the right? We put curved curbing there at the juncture between the two as a Y. Would that be helpful?
There's a specific nomenclature for those, and I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Or chop.
It's like a seashell exit or something, it's some weird thing.
You could put turning arrows, right arrow and left arrow.
So I believe that there is a turning arrow on the drive-through exit. The issue there is with snow in winter, you may not be able to see it. I will tell you that, what are we calling it? The lamb chop up exit? There's one location in town that I'm aware of that has that, and I get constant complaints from them. I mean, that was approved 30 years ago and they still complain about it. So I'm very hesitant to ask. I mean, it's a great idea in theory, but in practice,
That's why I'm asking.
but I agree with Mr. Johnson. There should be at least some kind of above ground signage. Look, we could beat people over the head until they're dead and they're still gonna turn right.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, personally, with a lot of these kind of like business parking lots, you just pay attention to where you are, 'cause you're in a parking lot.
Well,
So there's so many that I can think of right off the top of my head that are like that, where you just have to make sure that you're looking behind you.
That's what I was gonna say, is I think the more important task is to get people to stop or slow down enough that they look to their left or to their right and then make a reasonable move.
Or like saying a sign or whatever, so then you're like, oh yeah, there's people coming behind me, because I feel like lots of drive-throughs are like that anyways, where you can go all the way around the building and out.
Yeah, I agree. There's a limit to how safe we can make it. I mean, I'm amazed that people don't run into each other in Myers parking lot every day.
Yeah.
But just, are we comfortable with what we've got, with the amendments that have been suggested?
People are gonna go where they're gonna go. You put a sign there, it's in a parking lot, so it's not really. They're gonna go where they want to go. You can't fix.
Yeah.
Or not.
I think
Speaking for a man who's won many elections.
I think with what Mike and Tim said, if both of those lanes, if you had a stop sign on each side, take the flowering tree out, like Mr. Johnson, that tree is gonna grow up and it would block the view from the car parts store.
Yep.
98% of the people are all gonna go left because that's the exit.
Uh-huh.
I don't think people are gonna get their sub and go through advanced, they're all gonna be,
They're gonna go out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can put.
and it's
you
in a
can put
parking
Stop
lot,
sign.
like you said.
You're gonna go left.
You're gonna go left.
Too much
To
turning.
get out to the, uh-huh.
Like you said, it's such a
turning.
small area compared to the Meyer parking lot. Like you said, there's thousands of cars a day that just cross the center of the lots and nobody seems to.
turn- To turn right there into advance, it would be, you'd have to have a small car.
Yeah.
And you'd have to, because my full-size F-150 wouldn't make that turn.
Yeah, when I take my Dodge through there, it's tight.
There's no way. It's tight.
So,
I want everybody to go left anyways.
it sounds like we're trying to move forward on this. So I want to make sure that we're hitting everything
signs.
because there's a lot of stuff in here that we have to hit in order to make this work if we are seeking to approve this. So I want to confer with Mr. Johnson here because we're going to use your template, obviously, as we go through this. What have we missed that hasn't been addressed yet in our discussions?
Just basically, I think you kind of reached a consensus that with the two signs, two stop signs for the exit drive and one left turn only, that you kind of reach a consensus that that's safe enough for those slow moving cars. So you check that box off. I don't think you solved the barrier-free parking space location yet.
So like, let's pull, where is that an intractable issue? Or are we willing to accept that sometimes those spots could possibly be blocked?
That's my thought, is sometimes they might be blocked, just like they
Which
say,
spots are we talking?
The barrier-free.
they're how we can just leave them in the front and knowing that sometimes they might be parked. Or they might be blocked. It happens at the other drive-throughs. I think this place is a lot faster. I don't think you're gonna see them backed up that far.
I can imagine that most people are gonna allow somebody to pull out when needed.
Yeah.
We get the occasional jerk, but I think that's occasional is the key word there.
Myself, I think I just leave them the way they are on the site plan.
I agree.
Building facade. You have those slides in front of you there. Toggle back and forth, I think, between the black and white and the color version. You can see what those exterior materials are.
Building facade looks nice.
What page is that on?
88.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jump to that.
And that's all concrete on the sides?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah.
I remember looking at this the time
I know
before.
I did too.
Yeah, oh, that's on the agenda. This is kind of, my phone seems to work so much faster than the computer.
And I found a spot on Alpine that what we were talking about last, I sent it to Mike, where the metal and the wood or the concrete meet. It's Olga's on Alpine. It looks really good. So I think that's gonna
I've
look
seen,
really
this
good.
is very common. I've seen a lot of new businesses doing this that way.
I think it's
Entire
gonna look
downtown Grand Rapids by my
Good
office.
with it?
Yeah.
So, I'm not hearing any objection on the facade so far.
No,
Right by Studio Park.
Okay.
Nice look.
What's the material? What is the material for the, well, the top of the front elevation on the south elevation above the glass?
Johnson is right across the parking lot.
Oh, yeah, I know.
the metal.
Oh, the metal, okay. That is it's called Kingspan insulated metal panel in a zinc gray color. And that's just on the front.
The Side elevations, the materials on the back, or back and sides.
Yeah, so that is a treadstone ground face CMU, a concrete masonry unit. I spoke to the architect. They said that the colors of the CMU, there's about 3 different actual colors. And what they do is they ground it down so you can like kind of see the aggregate and bring out, yeah, I guess the beauty of the aggregate, but they're gonna go as white as possible on the shade.
One durable material that looked good and lasted a long time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's sounding like the facade is working. Were there any other issues that we needed to address, Mr. Johnson?
I can address one if you want me to.
Okay.
So one of the issues was that there's only provided a 5-foot wide sidewalk. Our ordinance requires a 7-foot sidewalk in these types of situations to accommodate vehicles who overhang the sidewalk. So applicant has indicated that there's really no way to solve that issue. And based on the location of the ADA and the entrance to the storefront, I suspect any person who does have disabilities would be able to just walk right up into the building. So we could require them to significantly alter their site plan and add the 7-foot sidewalk, but I think that's going to change a lot of things. And based on the ADA spots, it's probably an acceptable risk. The bigger issue is going to be the retailer on the west side. And that might affect them at some point. But similar to the stacking distance and all the other stuff we talked about, there are ways that we can influence change after the build out, which I'm more than willing to do if it becomes a problem. So that is an issue. You probably should, I guess, approve the deviation.
So for that, if it does become an issue on the west side, what would be the remedy? Like, do they put those little like curb stopper things?
Yeah, usually what I'd require is that they install bumper blocks.
Just to stop them from hanging up into the sidewalk.
Correct.
Yeah. There's 16-foot deep parking places.
Put up giant signs that say no F-150s here.
Truck parking, small vehicle here.
And then we did have the lighting.
The lighting. So,
And the
Rooms.
back parking spaces.
Yep, so one of the main problems was that there's just insufficient lighting at the ADA. And I was wondering if the applicant could put a wall pack or something there to further illuminate.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that one. I spoke to the architect. There will be lighting under that awning where that gray metal is. You'll be able to see it in the building elevation, kind of protrudes over the front doors. And he said that will be lighted. So that will bring us to the photometric, what did you call it? The
Minimum photometric, it's gotta be, I think, 3 candle power at the ADA
Yeah,
spots.
yeah, the candle
Now,
lighting.
for the motion, you could simply say sufficient lighting.
Question,
yes.
where would the Jimmy John sign put and then the future Plaza store, where would they put their signage? Where would that be located on the facade?
On the facade, or you mean on the street side?
Front side, okay.
Up on the top, up, yeah.
In the top metal portion, just so it's not hung down below the. Okay, thank you.
And there was the issue of the 2 parking spaces.
Mhm.
So
Eliminate 'em.
what was the consent? Is there a consensus on that? Whether or not those parking spaces need to come out?
I personally think it's fine either way. I don't think that there's gonna be a problem with the parking spaces either way, because it's a small parking lot. People just
I think we're low on lots down. If we take 2 more away, the next person that comes in might have needed those 2 lots.
But I guess the question would be, is it creating a hazard to keep those there the way they are? Can they be used without a hazard?
Well, going back to, again, people are pulling in there from a parking lot. They're not coming off the road.
Right,
I think they're gonna be going slow enough.
low speed.
They have to turn into the main drive, so they're already going slow, then they gotta turn right in.
Yeah,
If it was out onto a road, that'd definitely be a issue, but being in a parking lot, the way I feel, I think it'll be okay.
do you think
Inner movement.
says like compact cars only?
Ms. Hart, when you were doing the turning radiuses, that's the location where you indicated F-250s could pull out and then pull forward without going into the drive lane.
Okay,
So to Mr. Merlington's point, I think the only real issue is whether the person waiting to turn in is going to be reasonable and stop. If the F-250 can pull backwards, I'm less concerned about them putting their butt to the traffic.
I mean, they'd have to wait anyways. You always wait in parking lots for
Yeah.
people to pull out.
yeah.
Right.
No matter where.
Seems acceptable.
Okay.
I think it's fine.
Were there any other items that were left hanging that we neglected to cover?
Dumpster.
So they really haven't provided anything on their site plan regarding what the dumpster enclosure is gonna look like, which is a little frustrating because, again, like Mr. Johnson's indicated, this seems to be a habit with applicants. We could simply indicate that they must receive zoning approval for that, and they would have to submit a different permit at a later date. Similar to their signage.
So put that back to you.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, and remove that crabapple tree in the,
Radius.
Yeah, in the northeast corner.
yes, thank you. Those things cause too much havoc as it is.
Yeah, I think you want a clear vision.
Well, they drop and then you got little marbles that'll kill yourself if you're trying to walk on them. And they're just, they're horrible trees.
Just replace that with a shrub, like a low-lying shrub. So you have some greenery in the corner.
You gotta something for the.
Sure.
Because I'm unfamiliar with the reason why the tree was there in the first place. Is this a landscaping issue? Do they need something there?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Just making it look nice, probably on the site plan.
Okay, I'm going to openly admit my struggles here. I'm trying to bring up Mr. Johnson's report so that I can at least use a semblance of his suggested motion.
I believe that's in your agenda as well.
Is it?
We're trying something new, trying to add the motions to the agenda.
It's not in this.
I don't see it.
You did it for the public hearings. You didn't do it for this one.
No, that's my failure. I apologize.
Page 80 is-
Oh, well, that's why.
Didn't make sense to page.
I'm blaming Tim then.
Okay, thank you.
You can't blame him.
I was almost there.
I won't allow it.
He's on his way out the door. There's
I
nothing
know,
to
that's
do
why.
with it.
That's why.
Oh, my.
We can blame him retroactively after he's gone. All right, so that's already assumed. Okay. So this is like a page and a half, as it's already there. So I want to make sure that I've got all of the additional items included in here. And I will lean heavily on you, Mr. Johnson, if you have any suggestions as to how I can make this more wieldy or less unwieldy.
You leave the motion as it stands, the motion to approve, and then under conditions, under condition 1, you would scratch off item 2. They don't have to correct that. That's the two parking spaces coming in. Those get to stay. Condition number 2, change 35 parking spaces to 37. Same thing with number 3. Number 4, you can drop altogether. Number 5, the building facade is acceptable, and then 6, 7, and 8 would stay the same.
Oh, they're not doing
And
this,
then-
they're not doing the signs? We're just doing the stop sign? Is that right?
That's item 4. That's contained in item 4. And then I think maybe you want to add one additional stop sign for the exiting lane.
Yes.
A stop sign on each side.
Kind of where the crabapple was.
Mhm.
There you go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Replace the crabapple with a stop sign.
So let me, 4, I just want to make sure I got this right. You said 4 we could drop,
2 you can drop.
2 we could drop.
Condition, yeah. Site plan item number 2.
Site plan item number 2 I can drop.
Yeah.
But the of the 8 conditions, 4 needs to stay the same it was, or it can be dropped. That's what I want to make sure. When we went through that, I thought,
He said 4 we could drop. I don't know.
Dropped because we're leaving the spaces as they are.
Condition number 4 that says the barrier-free parking spaces, ...
hmm,
You can drop that.
okay, that's the way I had it, and I want to make sure I had that correct. So then, regarding the issues of the sidewalk width, the making sure we have sufficient lighting, the dumpster enclosure and the stop signs. Those would all have to be added at this point, right?
The dumpster enclosure and the crabapple tree are contained in, site plan items, 8, 9, and 10.
Okay, so if I accept it as it's written in there, we've handled the dumpster enclosure, the lighting,
Yes.
Okay.
Crabapple.
and crabapple tree, but we haven't handled the sidewalk width.
Yes, we did.
We did,
They're gonna go ahead and go with the
And you went through
5
the
foot.
5 feet.
Mhm.
but do I have to say anything in this motion for the 5 feet? Okay,
It's shown on the site plan, so you're checking.
there's just so many things on this one.
So make sure you take a deep breath on this one.
Okay. Excuse me. So I move to approve the request from Rapid 17 LLC for a special land use permit to establish a drive-through restaurant on the property located at 4173 17 Mile Road. The rest continues as was written in Mr. Johnson's sample motion. The approval is granted subject to the following conditions. Number one, to revise the site plans that comply with the items 4, 8, 9, and 10 of this report.
And then one more thing.
Yes.
Add on to that is add one more stop sign. At the exit lane.
You have that? So I will take with Mr. Johnson and add that. Number two is the same as written, except where it says 35 parking spaces, we're changing that to 37 parking spaces. Number three is as written with the same change for 35 spaces, it will be instead 37 spaces. Number four can be omitted. Number five, the building facade is acceptable. And 6 through 8 can remain the same.
One other point, did you resolve the issue that they don't have to provide a guaranteed parking space on the auto zone property?
Yes.
You don't need anything in writing, you're comfortable with.
We're-
Gonna go back and forth.
Yes.
Mr. Conley, I think for number 2, you don't want to replace those landscaping islands. You said as is. The one there says parking on both sides of the entrance should be replaced. We're keeping those, correct?
Going from 35 to 37.
Keeping the parking spaces. That says to replace with landscaping islands.
I think you're reading it right, but I think we understand.
Okay, I just want to make sure we get it on written down correctly when we put it in there.
Right.
Yeah. Because he said as is, and I thought we
Yeah, I see
didn't
what you're
want those
saying.
landscaping islands and we wanted to keep the parking spaces that are on the plan, right? Yes.
You understand.
I have the motion here, so if it's different from the motion, then it needs to be revised.
Okay. Let's put it this way. I have a motion on the table. I don't fully understand what you're saying, so I'm willing to entertain it, but right now the motion's on the table as it is, and I don't know how to change it
All right.
with,
I'll let you
I don't-
finish and then we'll talk.
okay. So is there a second for the motion as it stands?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Now, if you could help me understand,
Just number 2, it says, you said as is when you said that for on the record, but I think it says, that says the parking space on both sides of the entrance should be replaced with landscape islands. We're not replacing them. We're leaving those 2 spaces there, correct?
Yeah.
And so that should not be as is. It should be pretty much stricken, right? We don't
Well,
even need number 2 in
he
there.
Took out, yeah, he doesn't have this. He has, for number 1, he says revise the site plan with 4, 8, 9, and 10.
I didn't
He
include,
didn't even include.
Yeah, we didn't include 2.
Yeah, so 2 is the items in his report, and then this is the
Mhm.
motion referring to.
I'm on page
item 2.
77.
Does
That's
that
my
make sense?
mistake. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he left off 2 completely.
There's confusion about it being first item.
Item 2 and number 2,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Yep, that's my mistake. So my apologies.
okay, awesome. No, I'm glad.
Get it clarified.
No apology necessary. I'm glad we clarified it. Absolutely.
Just know I know how to read apparently, just not the right spot.
Oh, there's
There's lots of pages there.
lots here. We're trying to go back and forth on slow computers.
Oh, back and-
Okay, the question of, before we move forward on this, I think we should address the issue of, do we want this to be, their agreement to be more concrete with Advanced Auto before we move forward?
I think it's nice if they're sharing parking, but I don't think it's necessary if they come back and say, no, we don't.
I agree with her.
The motion I had didn't include it, but if we were going to include that, this would be the time to make that amendment.
So practically speaking, I mean, the difference is if I get phone calls from Family Farm and Home or Advance Auto saying that the Jimmy John's people are using our parking spaces, difference is I'm gonna say tough luck, talk to the city council or the planning commission because they approved this.
I mean, I don't see how you force
I'm just saying,
Auto to,
Miss Sam wanted to be
stay.
giving your phone number out and saying, talk to her about.
I mean,
Put in the
Mr.
court.
Womack,
I
is
just
this something that we can change? Like if somebody does come in there and wants to use that, there's agreement between the retail space and
Correct.
Advance?
No, again, really, this is similar to the bumper blocks. We have ways of persuading people to do the right thing.
Yeah.
We don't like doing that. We prefer to clean it up today, but you know, look, we do expect businesses to be neighborly. There's a reason that we require writings with signatures on them. But I believe the board has found that 37 parking spaces are sufficient.
And wasn't it the case when the next person comes in,
They have to get special
They
land.
have
use.
to
they still gotta get the
Yeah.
land use? So we're gonna be going back to parking eventually.
Well, they've got to
obviously.
get parking approval. not
Yeah.
necessarily special.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wouldn't,
well, yeah, that's what I meant, yeah.
wouldn't an email hold up in court anyway? Does to go to
That's what the
jail.
judge should decide.
Mhm.
Go to jail.
but like, so having it in writing would mean that if Advanced Auto then said no, they can't say no anymore. It's their-
Essentially, yeah.
Could you provide that for us? Writing? You're going, shaking your head. All right, you have sent it to him. Have him get something to us if you would, please. I would add that to your motion if that's acceptable.
I don't think I'd get any more binding than what you have.
Yeah, understandable.
So, I'd like to amend my motion to add that, that we would require, a signed agreement as described here, between Advanced Auto and its property.
What about Family Farm and Home?
They didn't.
They've already denied that.
They did?
Yep.
Okay,
Last one.
So do I have a second for that?
I'll second it.
So, Mr. Connolly, to be sure, we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
The only thing that we currently have is an email between these parties, essentially saying that they're going to be neighborly with each other and be willing to share parking spaces. This is not a conditional approval saying you must have X number of parking spaces available to me, signed and dated. Because I'm sure having somebody at Advance Auto saying, sure, we agree to be neighborly, that's probably okay. But as far as conditional approval of you must have 27 parking spaces available for us to use at all times, I don't think they're going to sign that. So if that's what you're asking, I'm sure they can do that.
So, at the risk of making this even more cumbersome, what, what can I do to make it so the city manager has, comfort with this? So, because I was honestly just doing this to try to make it.
Oh, you will never make me comfortable.
All right,
The agreement at this time, because we could get another GM in there, because he's talking about Casey, we could get another GM in there who's not Casey, and then he turns around and goes, no, that's not cool, we're not gonna do that. So the agreement at this time, as we take it,
Can I say anything?
Certainly.
I personally don't think they need the more parking with the information that we have at this time. And if they fill the retail spot, then they'll have to come back to make sure that that parking still fits. So we have a second chance to make sure. And I honestly don't feel comfortable making another business agree to do something in perpetuity so that another business has the parking spaces. Either we think that the parking spaces they have now is sufficient, or they can't do the business here. I don't think it should rely on Advanced Auto to put it in in a contract to say, no, you have. I mean, we don't know what the managers are gonna be like in there.
I agree.
Like,
Point taken.
it's. I don't know
So,
why a business would do that.
after further input from the manager, and what I've heard from the rest of the commission, I'm going to re-amend my motion to what it originally was. Could I have a second for that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
For
Is there any-
the question,
Oh, no.
Any further discussion?
call for the question.
Well, if we call for the question, we can have a vote as to whether or not we're going to move forward. Or I can just ask right now, are we ready to move forward?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of the motion on the table, please signify with aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
My head hurts.
My head hurts too.
Mine more.
But it's on the right page now, so I'm good.
Okay.
All right, moving right along.
Okay.
If I was advanced auto, I would
Sorry, what?
never.
It's my birthday today, so-
No.
way I would sign a
No,
contract
we're
with
not
them.
gonna
Maybe
sign.
even
He's also talking about the GM. Well,
Okay.
that's not my.
Okay,
GM.
so moving on.
Is that this one?
Don't forget your paperwork, by the way.
The turning point.
Thank you for providing that. That was very helpful.
Mr. Conley, just think in 2 months' time, this won't go as smoothly. Mr. Johnson won't be here to lead us.
I'm
Yeah,
just
but
gonna,
you-
I'm going to
Wait.
table everything.
I don't even wanna think about,
I'm going to
you're
be
not gonna
tabling
think
everything
about us, don't
indefinitely.
even lie.
With a Mai Tai.
I know,
in
he's
hand,
gonna be sipping a
unlike
margarita.
KP.
I move to
Don't
adjourn.
even.
I think we're just gonna move our meetings to Mr. Johnson's house from now on.
Okay, so I'd like,
All this has been training for you. I've been trying to train you for the last 4 years, so
Oh.
hopefully you picked up some.
No, I've only been here for a few months.
I'm not
so-
trainable.
Yeah, me too.
okay, so I would like to move the meeting forward though, because we have used up a
Yes.
lot of time and I want to see how much of this we can get through
All right.
in a reasonable amount of time. So we had a discussion scheduled next under old business 9B for the sample industrial building facade requirements ordinance.
So I don't want to go through this point by point, mostly because I've already identified a few things that probably need to be changed.
Uh-huh.
I guess my question, generally speaking, is whether you liked the proposed changes that I've made, mostly highlighted in yellow, and whether you saw or identified any potential issues with that. Now, the majority of the change consists of basically increasing the number of facade types that industrial buildings can use that standard commercial type uses cannot. So you'll see that some of the language is repeated. Under the commercial side, it'll say metal panels, dry vit, et cetera, can only be used for trim pieces. Whereas under the industrial building section, it'll say, oh yeah, you know, you can use all these things as the main part of your building. But I also added some language in there that I got from some other locations, primarily the base body and cap section. And what that's essentially doing is saying, okay, we'll let you use steel panels. But you know, you got to break it up into 3 different sections that are either colored differently, have different texture, different materials. So it provides a pleasingness to the eye, architecturally speaking. Whereas we still allow them to use the cheaper materials. They just have to do something else with it to make it look nice. I don't know if you guys have gone out to see the Jade Farms building that's been
Yes.
erected.
Looks very nice.
But I was out there chatting with those guys the other day, creepily taking pictures of the facade. And you look at across the street and there's a number of, we'll call them mini storage, but they're actually quite large storage buildings. And you can see the contrast and difference between those two. The Jade Farms has about a 3-foot portion on the bottom where it's a different color. And the body is a different color, and then the roof is a different color. When you look across the street, it's just a giant slab side, all one color. So we're essentially trading the option and ability to use a cheaper material for different colors and different, you know, textures. One of the things that did add in here was concern about vehicles hitting the building and causing dents and stuff like that. Yeah, because steel panels, when they get hit by a building, it leaves a permanent, divot that will never get corrected. So one of the things I've seen in other communities is that they require any areas that could be hit by a vehicle have a more resilient type material, which kind of plays in with the base requirement anyways. And I discussed that with the guys at Jade Farms, and they said, yeah, that wouldn't be a big deal for us. We're not making them change anything, but just discussing things. The building colors section is essentially the same. I did add in a requirement that if you have office or administrative space on the inside of an industrial building, and that area abuts an exterior wall, that we would require windows at that location. I think windows also help kind of open up and make it look like a real building instead of just a pole barn. So that's a majority of the changes I made. I did put an exterior HVAC and mechanical system screening requirement in there. We do have that somewhere else in our ordinances, but I figured no reason you can't repeat it. I did add in a small change about corporate colors. So for example, we had Loom who wanted to use purple. We said, no, it's a bad idea. And I think the building looks great the way it is. But I don't want to fully preclude purple from being used, even though it's on our prohibited colors list. So it still leaves all the power in the planning commission to decide whether purple would be acceptable or not. But at least to give them the option to say, you know what, purple is so important to our corporate structure. Can we at least do this and this? And I made some minor changes to the already existing sections. Now, some of the changes I would like to make, and again, I'm not requiring you guys to weigh in on this, but you'll see that it's broken down into building materials, building architecture. Third section I skipped over. Building design. I'm not entirely sure we need to have that separated into 3 sections because they kind of intertwine with each other. So I may just want to kind of rearrange everything. So with all that being said, the question is, do you have any problems with any of the stuff that I added or subtracted in the draft so far?
I do have a question now. We were talking about if they do a building like Jade Farms, should you put something in there that instead of having to do a bottom of some type of layer, they could do the stop sticks?
Stop sticks?
Or balusters.
Oh, you mean
Ballards.
yeah, to set. So okay, so we're talking about the section where it would require more resilient or durable base. Okay. Yeah, there is a section in here because I discussed that issue. I don't want people to start sticking bollards out there to prevent vehicles from hitting the building and then have that act as an out.
What is that? Sorry.
A bollard? Those big yellow sticks that you see in front of a vehicle entrance that prevent you from hitting the building.
Oh,
Blue yellow post.
is this like a problem?
It is. If you go past the fire station, you'll see all the entrances where the fire trucks go in. Have these yellow bollards on each side. It's because
We're talking about people hitting like buildings.
yes,
Oh, yeah.
with your vehicle.
Yes.
Yeah,
I've hit the side of the old fire station about 4 times.
Well, they're driving in and out.
And these vehicles will be the same thing.
There's a lot of old pole barn buildings with really crazy dented up sides out there.
Yep, so there is language that says even if you
Keep in
have a
mind.
bollard, we'd still require the resilient material. Now, there are 2 other caveats there. One of which is if you have a sidewalk, I think it says 5 foot and a 6-inch rolled curb, then you don't have to have it.
Okay.
You'd have to be a real bad driver to go up that sidewalk and still hit the building.
Hey,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But also there's if it's separated by a 3-foot landscaping section, that would also be sufficient. Now, I don't think that landscaping section is going to stop a vehicle, but I think that does encourage people to put landscaping there. So we can change that if you want.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure.
nitpicking again.
In general, we asked, a few months ago when this issue came up, when the Jade Farms, when this issue came up. Could we have some clearer language on what's applicable to an industrial building versus a commercial building? And I believe you've provided that.
Yes.
So I'm happy with a lot of the elements you put here. I'm sure we, if we look forever, we could probably tweak this or tweak that, but I think you're on the right track.
We can change it as we go.
I would like to polish a little bit more before we make any recommendations, but moving forward, I'm really just looking for, I really don't like this, or you totally missed this issue. And then I'll work on
I will say I do totally like the windows part,
Yeah.
so I'd like that to stay in.
I did speak with the Jade Farms folks, so I've been inside the building. It's really well done. Matter of fact, the Lara folks, the MRA folks, they've indicated that's one of the nicest grow facilities that they visited. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that maybe I can get some of you guys in there at some point to see the interior of the building, see how it turned out.
That'd be great.
So do you have what you need from us on that today?
No, thank you.
Okay. The next item was a discussion on the walls and fence ordinances that we've been kicking around for several decades now.
So I keep putting this on your agenda more out of morbid curiosity than anything else. It's pretty involved, and I could walk you through it tonight, but it's going to take some time. And I wonder if it's the end of summer. I haven't had a fence application in over a month now. I think maybe if you guys are willing to, we put this towards the next agenda where you don't really have site plans to review. And then I will talk you to death about it.
That's just fine.
Okay,
Motion to table that.
seconded.
That's just a discussion
But-
item, so we don't need to table.
Same thing.
Moving on.
Any comments you guys have about, I really hate this, we really need to address this issue,
Yeah,
please let me know.
we need to deal with it one of these times.
Mhm.
Other than that, we could just, discuss it, and thank you for anything you guys have to say.
No, I like the very first thing where you had the not using the fence slats or the material to make a see-through fence.
I feel
opaque.
bad, that's kind of my own personal thing. I hate that. I think it's horrible. I think. it's
No,
horrible.
I
Always have.
don't like the fence slats.
So I appreciate your support on that.
Yeah, I hate those things. And the material, we had the one landscape company that did it beautifully. And then we had the other company that just meh.
So that was one of the things I added here, and I'll just address that real quick.
Oh, we passed over that.
Yeah, I kind of thought, so
Let's talk about fence next month.
we didn't actually end the discussion, but if you have something you'd like to add there, Mr. Womack, we certainly.
Yep, so here's the language, and just for your knowledge, and I don't really want to discuss it, but so Mr. Nixon's aware. Pre-existing see-through fences or walls on commercially zoned properties may have installed a tight-fitting, high-density polyethylene privacy fence in order to comply with screening requirements imposed by the Planning Commission.
Tight fitting, thank you.
High-density polyethylene privacy fence screening, by the way, I get that language off like Home Depot, so. Is not permitted on residential zone properties and is not permitted without approval of the Planning Commission. High-density polyethylene privacy screening is not an acceptable alternative to the installation of other purpose-built solid fencing options for new fencing.
Sounds great.
In other words, you can add that to an old fence that already exists. It has to be tight-fitting.
Yes, and I like that.
So that's language. We also don't have to require it or allow that.
No,
We could just say not permitted.
no, but they, like I said, they did it perfect because it looks great, but then the tight fitting, that's. a
So
good one.
please review, look at the language, let me know if you do or don't like
Oh, we have a
anything.
pot shop going in there now.
New business.
I know.
Discussion on bylaws modification. So we did some interesting things with the agenda tonight. I was happy with it, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna let Mr. Womack explain what else is in here.
So there are a couple minor problems with what occurred tonight. Scrolling. Okay, so I did put a motion in on the marijuana business. The problem is, for the most part, when we set a public hearing, that's usually the first time that you're seeing a site plan. The only reason that this worked tonight was because this was a site plan that had previously been approved of by this body. Adding a motion for approval on a first review site plan probably is not the best idea. Even though I think you guys would all agree, things have been getting better because we've been doing the initial reviews. But I still don't know whether you guys are going to approve something. And I just, it very much so muddies the agenda. It makes it a little bit more complex, a little dirtier. And I'm just not 100% sure I want to do that. There might be a different way for me to do that. Maybe put the proposed motion in my manager's report or some other way for it to be a little bit more easily accessible instead of scrolling through 300 pages of the packet. I'm open to suggestions, but I think it probably doesn't work unless I know you guys are set to approve of that at a first hearing.
For me, the issue is the separation of the discussion from the public hearing. Whether or not we actually make the motion to approve it is secondary. Do we have, can we keep the format where we have the public hearing and launch directly into discussion and consideration of the item? We can grab the motion that we might conceivably use from a variety of places. It doesn't have to be on the agenda, as long as we can have those items, the consideration of the item and the public hearing together and not separated by an hour and other business.
So instead of having a proposed motion, you just want to see the, I guess, the indicated site plan review being immediately following a public hearing. So we would use the same language that we normally would have. We would add, the site plan, the reports, the project narrative, all that stuff. It would just be under the public hearing section immediately following the public hearing.
I think that's what you're saying.
If it's, I mean, if it's acceptable, I guess, that
It's fine by me. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
I mean, my understanding was that if we did that, we'd have to make some modifications to the bylaws to make that happen.
Yeah, and we'll draft them. If that's what you guys want, we'll draft the appropriate language and you guys can approve that at your next meeting.
It seems like the meetings flow better,
I think so.
keeping them like
Or
that.
like
You
that.
don't get the big separations between them.
It's still fresh in your mind once we have the public hearing and it goes through and then go right into a motion.
Yep.
Approve or disapprove.
Motion
I
or-
do like having the motions in the agenda. So if not for the only reason that you did them, like how we were reading off of his report and having the motion to be able to have it in two different places.
Yeah, the only problem with doing that is I kind of feel like it gives me too much power to influence whether something is approvable at that moment in time or not.
We can change it.
Well, there have been times where, I've seen something that I didn't think could ever be approved and you guys were like, "That's done, you're approved." There are other ones where, 5 meetings in, you're like, "Why aren't you approving this?" And you guys ultimately deny it. So I just, for the same reason that it's nice to have a planner and a zoning administrator. You don't want to have one person influencing you too much. So I set the agendas and I just feel a little uncomfortable doing that if I don't know you're going to approve a project.
Besides, if you put the motion on the agenda, anybody that reads it assumes you're going to approve it because it's written in the policy.
Okay, so can we just have the sample motions in a different,
Which is what I propose.
It's just managers
or like in your
report.
manager's report at the very end or whatever? So I just like it taken out of the packet so that I can look
Sure,
at
can do
the
that.
motion and the report and whatever it was that
I
we're.
can do that for everybody but you.
Thank you.
It is very difficult up here on trying to do this on the Chromebooks because as you're trying to scroll through things, it freezes.
They literally freeze, yeah.
And you're just looking at a blank screen for a while, waiting for it to catch up.
Yeah, I'm faster on my phone up here than I am with this.
I just thought you were on Instagram or
No,
something.
no, I was actually on the packet on my phone.
Hashtag.
I mean, it's faster. I can just
Exactly.
scroll down
Yeah.
and it's clearer on my phone, so.
I just know I flip back between all of the.
Yeah, those things are high end. I think they were like $100 a piece
Yeah, they're ace.
I can
How
tell.
many years ago?
Yeah.
many years ago.
So,
Rosie, we need new laptops.
so as far as the discussion items, A and B about the ordinance reviews and the conjunction with public hearings, Are these two separate issues you need us to cover here,
Well,
or?
so I kind of feel like I understand what you want regarding subpart A. Now, subpart B, it gets a little bit more complex. So your current, how you like it laid out is old business, new business. So if we're now saying, okay, if you have a public hearing, that instantly goes to the top, which is usually going to be new business anyway, so that's fine. Although now you're discussing new business ahead of old business because it was a public hearing. What I'm at least proposing here is we do a hard separation between site plan reviews and other items. Site plan reviews have people here, and we want to take care of them first. Whereas these types of issues, we can do at the end of the meeting because nobody cares except for us. So I wonder if you guys are at least open to the idea of maybe changing the overall format, and or whether do you find value in conducting old business first, because those people who were last time, you know, they deserve to be heard before the new business, which gets a little bit more complicated if we're going to do this public hearing thing now.
Yeah, I personally like what you're saying with the site plan reviews, to lump them together at the beginning. Because when you say old business, well, some of our old business tonight was this site plan review for someone on their second time through. The other one was a fence ordinance that we perpetually table. So there are different levels of importance of old business here. But if we had the site plan designation, that would allow this old business to move to the front and the other old business to gravitate to the back if we have time for it. So I'd be okay with that.
Other than other business, do we have any other catchy names we can add to that section?
Mike's hot mess.
I mean,
That's my daily job designation.
We'll let you think about it.
yeah, I mean, you're right, we could change the actual, the
Wouldn't it just
headings
be-
on here.
Wouldn't it just be site plans, old business, new business? I mean, we can think of other names. I'm just saying essentially, isn't that what you're proposing?
Really what I'm thinking is site plans, I guess, new and old, and then other business.
Right.
Whether it's new or old, doesn't matter, you know, we'll just other business.
What would qualify as other?
Fence ordinance reviews, industrial building facade reviews, drain commissioner property that's gonna be donated to the city, recommendations. Anything that's not a site plan.
All other business.
General business.
General business, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have to have old and new business necessarily, other than if we want to distinguish between old and new site plans.
Okay.
But in order to be fair to applicants that will be in here, but the other business can all be lumped at the end. However you want to call it, in my opinion.
Agree.
So I guess we'll put together some proposed modifications for your bylaws and we'll bring them back for approval.
Awesome. Okay, so next, it was a discussion, it was 8:46, so we're not that bad. We're almost done. Discussion on offer by the Kent County Drain Commissioner to donate property commonly known as 17 North Main to the city.
So this is something we've kind of known was coming for some time. I'm not sure if I've always expressed that to everybody, including the planning commission, but the city council knew this was likely to occur. So this is the building that was knocked over as part of the storm drain project. It was a white building immediately north of the Chase Bank parking lot. It's currently, I believe, just a sand lot. And there has been discussion with the DDA about potential uses of this property, maybe as a semi-permanent food truck location. So the issue is that under the potential donation, if you guys read it, basically prohibits the installation or construction of a permanent building. So it doesn't really have good commercial use. So allowing them to sell it or give it to somebody else, I don't know if it'll get much use. The question for you guys is whether you think this is a good piece of property for the city to take and whether you want to make that recommendation to the city council.
what happens if we don't, oh, I'll let you ask Mr. Hall first, and then I have my question.
I am concerned whether we take it, if it goes on the tax roll, if we're gonna end up paying property taxes on that piece of property.
Yeah, so I addressed this issue with the assessor last week, and he was gonna give me more answers tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not pressuring you guys to make any changes or recommendations today. I just simply want to let you know this is something we have to discuss. My understanding of tax law, my brilliant legal mind, is that it's only taxed if it's not being used for a public purpose. Now, if we were to say, give it to the DDA and say, here you go, DDA, make it a permanent food truck location, we would then be taxed accordingly.
Yes.
Now, I don't know what the taxes would be. Obviously, that's an important consideration.
See, we got in trouble with a Skyhawk. We leased them that property out there in the wastewater and we're paying taxes there. So you're leasing that property to a food truck. So ultimately you're under contract. So it's not for the use of the public. It's specifically the use of a food truck. So
So,
it's subject to property tax.
yeah, so obviously, if we were gonna be letting a food truck make a profit there, and our taxes were $3,000 a year, we'd say, okay, each month you have to pay us $350 so that the profit is greater than the taxes. I'm not a business guy, so I don't know if we want to make a profit or just break even.
We're nonprofit.
But that's a way that could be addressed. Now, that being said, the area directly here in front of City Hall, with the colored concrete and the benches, that is not taxed.
Yeah.
It's a pocket park. It's for the value of the public, and the
Right.
public can use it at their leisure. So that is an option. We could turn it into a park of some kind. But how many parks do we really need?
There it is. It's like, I'd just soon have the county pay us taxes.
Well, they don't pay taxes to us. So,
They own it, then we don't have to maintain it. We don't have to take it, nothing.
yeah, so ultimately, if we accept the donation, we're at least masters of our own destiny. If we don't accept it, then you're right. To a certain extent, we don't have to mow the lawn.
They could possibly give it to the bank then, right? The bank could hard surface it for more parking
They could give
if
it
the
to
city did.
But like, how does that work? Cause it's like literally in the middle of our city.
They could literally
then
give
they
it to
can
the
do it to-
Ku Klux
they can
Klan. and
give it
there's
to
not much we
whoever.
can do about it.
Yeah.
So taxing authorities tend to roll downhill. And the city, for our public purposes, we don't pay taxes. So if the county were to maintain that for a public purpose, which right now it is, it's operating as an easement for a drainage line, then they're not required to pay taxes on it.
And
And if you know anything about higher taxing authorities, they tend not to take care of their properties.
Yes.
so what would be the pro of declining the donation?
We wouldn't theoretically have to mow the lawn.
We have to deal with it.
Mr. Nixon.
Thought you had a question.
No, I thought you had a question.
I was trying to give the floor to you.
Oh, well,
Oh.
I'm,
You guys are
I'm the
supposed to be
chair. I
on
can take
each
the
other.
floor whenever I want. My question
Okay.
already came up.
I don't, that small parking lot there where, right across from the Kent Theater, where the Chase parking lot is, it butts right now next up to it. I don't see why we couldn't pave that and just extend that parking lot a little bit for the theater and stuff.
There's a few problems there. First of all, we don't own the Chase Bank parking lot. That is a private parking lot. Second of all, so the only way you would be able to enter onto that property would then be through Main Street. And the city has a policy where we're trying to avoid driveways over the sidewalk. Plus, I don't even know how many parking spaces you could actually get there because you have to have the drive lane.
Too narrow,
Yeah, it's very narrow, so you might only be able to get 5 or 6 parking spaces.
with no movement lane.
So I think I don't want to push it, but I think the food truck idea is reasonable. It's no
Yeah.
permanent installation. and
Besides, it's too close to the other restaurants, correct?
So right now, we have an ordinance. It's a mobile vending ordinance, which allows food trucks. One of the requirements is that food trucks have to be a minimum of 200 feet away from other restaurants unless they've gotten approval from those restaurants. Now, that being said, the city council can change that law if they want to. They can make an exception for this property too. And I suspect if this were given to the DDA, who are business owners and restaurant owners, they would likely do something like, okay, well, we don't have a coffee place in downtown, so we'd allow a coffee truck.
Yeah.
Or we don't have an ice cream place in downtown, so we'd allow an ice cream truck. What they're not going to do is say, oh, it's next to a Mexican restaurant, let's have a taco truck.
That's my point. I mean, those restaurants in town are paying taxes
Yeah.
and paying the overhead and the employees. I'd hate to throw
Brick and
two food
mortar.
trucks there that's gonna compete with the Bird and Jose's nightly.
So another option, if you guys have been to Sparta, is shipping container shops.
Boutique shops they got.
Yeah, so again, not permanent installations. I think we could only maybe fit one or two on there. And that's a good alternative to food trucks or in addition to a food truck.
You could probably do 4.
Can't we do like a couple of these? for
Two
a couple
east,
of
west,
years
and north,
see what we
south.
like?
Well, yeah, but
Like-
only if we accept the property, which is the only thing we're discussing.
Right, but in terms of usage, we could change our mind about what is allowed there and what isn't allowed.
Yeah, if we accept the property.
So in the end, this is the city council, right?
Unfortunately, under the ordinances, you guys are obligated to give a recommendation.
Yep.
On the acceptance of donated property.
Well, the worst case, the city doesn't pay taxes on it and you just mow the grass.
Pretty much.
Worst case. If we took it.
Yeah, I
Sounds
think
like this
if
is a
it was
no-brainer.
on the outside of the city, like by a little highway or something, then maybe you could risk it, but.
I think we
I
have to
think-
accept it because
I
I'd be
think so, too.
scared to know who they would give it to.
Or just them not taking care of it and then we don't own it and we can't really do anything about it.
That's true.
And
That's-
then
Yeah,
it's a pocket of just like weeds in the middle of downtown.
Yes.
that's true.
Especially
too.
we just did the overlay, all these people are trying to get in here and then we have that empty lot that's doing nothing.
Yeah,
They're
that's
only
true.
just trying to get rid of it. They don't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was, you folks weren't around when we went round and round with our tax assessor, when they put all this property on the tax rolls that we had. And ultimately, we had to physically convert them to a park to get them off the tax roll, with the exception of the old wastewater site. We're still paying property taxes to the county on that.
But we would be able
I'm
to
with
make
you.
this a public area if we wanted to.
Could I,
Or-
well, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Didn't mean to
No,
jump
no, no,
over
no,
you.
go ahead.
But by the fact it's already an easement for a drain, it's already defined as a public area, just a question of who owns it.
Yeah, so I suspect, and of course, this is why I'm not asking for a recommendation today. I suspect when I speak with the assessor tomorrow, and I explain to him the city's position, that he's likely to say, if it just remains an empty lot, it will be a public purpose and not taxable. It's only when you change it for a food truck or, these other things that it could become taxable. Or you could put a pocket park there. You could put a bench there. You could put a garden there, and those are public purposes and not taxable. I understand Mr. Hall's point, and he's right. But that was under a different assessor. Did you have a city manager at that time?
Yes, and this one still puts stuff on, the one we have now.
Well, of course, there are laws that he follows, and I don't like them, but he is doing it correctly.
Yeah.
But you have a city manager who knows how to avoid these things as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, for the price of mowing it, we get to control our destiny on it.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, because I feel like if we do make it a business lot and it ends up costing money, then we can pull back on that and then just make it a public park. Right.
There's nothing permanent can be put on it, nothing
Right.
permanent. So if it didn't work out after 2 years, you could be like, okay,
I
we're
imagine
going back
that
to
you
grass and a
also-
bench.
I imagine that we also could put term limits on anything that we allow there.
Well, if you talk to the DDA members, their concern is actually the other way around. They don't want a food truck who's here today, gone tomorrow.
Yep.
Mhm.
Their desire is get somebody who's established and force them to be there 3 nights a week for a year.
That, yes, long,
the one on
long
North
term,
Main.
I wouldn't say like only do it for a week and see if it works out, but say like through to 2022. And then we could go back to the table and be like, nope, we literally lost money all year long.
Well,
We had to pay the taxes on it and it didn't actually work out. They weren't able to pay it, whatever the issue is, and then revert it back to a non-taxable lot.
yeah,
If
if
it's
whoever-
only gonna be the warm months, you're not gonna have a food truck there in the winter,
Why not?
cause
You could
it's
do-
gonna freeze up.
You could do.
Waffles.
Cause they
I
have
think,
to
like,
have the
coffee- I
water.
think, like, coffees and stuff.
There's no way.
Waffles.
What's
Wouldn't
that?
Be there in the winter.
You don't have a
All right,
walkable
well,
downtown. It's not gonna
whatever,
be there. Nobody
regardless,
walks downtown
that's
right
true,
now.
yeah.
They would freeze up. There's no way to have a food truck operate.
Generator.
Well,
That
and we
doesn't
could,
keep
we
the
could
tanks
provide
up.
utilities at the site too. No. We could theoretically after November. Utilities at their site.
Well, it's not the utilities ain't my point. These food trucks are not winterized vehicles. You know, they get
I'm
pulled
just,
to a
I was
show.
just giving a
They set up for the day and
an
they come back and they
arbitrary-
drain their fresh water tanks.
deadline of saying, we'll try this for this certain amount of time and then see where we come out on the tax.
Yes, without
Because
getting
then
too,
if it
go ahead.
doesn't work, we can revert back to what he's saying is that we don't want to be responsible for taxes that aren't helping people.
Without
So
getting
if
too
it's
much,
not bringing in the business, then we'll just make it.
We're
hard.
done.
without getting too much in the weeds here. Was I correct in saying that you weren't ready for us to give a full recommendation tonight?
No, I would ask for it for next month.
Because you want
So,
to ask the
so,
assessor, right?
so we're having a lot of discussion, which is good because we need to think about it, but
Yeah.
we don't need to actually conclude this tonight.
Right.
Well, yeah, so when we go in front of the council, I'll say they had some great discussion and they totally agreed with the city manager's point of view.
I'll say,
If I can find some city council members and tell them otherwise, I will.
do it after November.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think I know one.
Okay, so then open discussion for issues not on the agenda. Correspondence yearly calendar, is this the same thing we did last? So there's no real new stuff there?
It's just informational. It'll be on there for the rest of the year.
Staff comments, city manager.
I guess I'll thank Mr. Johnson for his time he served here with this community. How long have you been here now?
4 years.
1.5 years.
So we just got him 36 years too late, I think.
Mhm.
But you know, he's been a nice and refreshing change from where we were
Yes.
at 4.5 years ago. Hate to see him go. And of course, on your next agenda, we'll have some discussion items about how to move forward. And yeah, I appreciate all the hard work you guys put in. You know, the city council, they do some very important stuff, but the planning commission the last several years has been the working body here in this community. So I do appreciate that. And other than that, I apologize. I was sick for a week this month, so I didn't get as much done as I would have liked to, but yeah, we're here till 9 o'clock each time, and that's probably enough, right? So thank you, everybody.
City clerk?
I just would like to introduce Tracy. She is the deputy clerk. This is Tracy Blackmore. You guys may see her from time to time, but she's here tonight observing and learning the way.
Is she conditional employee, meaning she could leave after seeing this tonight? Have we scared her off?
No, I'm staying.
Okay,
Sorry.
Planning commission members, any comments?
Good job doing all the motions.
Thank you. I'm
Those are tough ones too.
This is the night I forgot to print off Mr. Johnson's reports first, so I have them in front of me. So I was really struggling tonight. So thank you, Mr. Johnson, for being a crutch tonight, because I really could not keep track of all of it. And that's all that I've got. City council representative.
You know, I've said this all along, you know, this body here makes the major decisions and sets the destiny and the direction the city will go for the next 10 to 15 years. What we put together here and what we require these businesses to do and what they have to do to come to our community, it all rests on the planners commission and the city planner. So as Mr. Womack said, you guys are the hardest working board. The council is just like, yes, we take your recommendation very seriously. And we agree most of the time, but there may be a time they may not. Most of the time we do, you know, and We do appreciate, every one of the council members do appreciate the planning commission, especially for the last year that we've been here, of all the work we put together for these new businesses coming to town. So, having said that, it's great to see everybody here. Let's hope we can keep that for the time being. And we'll get ready for Red Flannel Day.
A report of the planning consultant.
Well, apparently it's no secret that I'm not staying much longer, but I will be here for the next meeting, working with Mike to keep him from saving from himself for the next month. So I appreciate working with you. You are a hardworking bunch. I've seen a lot of improvement and a lot of good things happen. So moving our office out of our, where we are now, and I'm gonna keep one client that I've had for quite a while. Next week, I have one project, so it's just time to do something else. I figure I've been to over 3,000 places.
I've been to that many. I've been to that many.
Well, the good news, I think that means you're immortal because you probably already died inside from
Planning commission meeting.
all of those meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if there's such a thing as planning commission.
Okay, well, with that, we're adjourned.
You're gonna tell the public that you are personally responsible for bringing Jimmy Benson.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.